In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the latest generation of Ubiquiti's EdgeRouter devices. That's the EdgeRouter 4 and the EdgeRouter 6P. We're going to compare these two and then take them out of the box and set them up with a simple configuration to help get you started. Welcome to Crosstalk Solutions. My name's Chris, and here I have the EdgeRouter 4 or ER4 model number and the EdgeRouter 6P or the ER6P. Now these devices are very similar in terms of the CPU and RAM. They both have a quad-core 1 GHz processor. They also both have 1 GB of DDR3 memory inside, as well as 4 gigs of flash storage. They're both capable of processing 3.4 million packets per second. So for the price point, these are a really great home or small office router. I mean, really, they're probably good enough to be a medium office router as well, though I would probably go for something like the EdgeRouter Pro if you're going to put it into a medium office. The operating temperature of these devices are from -10 to 50 degrees Celsius, which is actually 14 up to 122 degrees Fahrenheit. And then the max power consumption of the EdgeRouter 4 is 13 watts, whereas the max power consumption of the EdgeRouter 6P is 16 watts, not counting the PoE capability. Okay, so let's bring the camera in close. I'm going to get these unboxed and we can take a look at them side by side. Okay, here we go. We're going to start with the EdgeRouter 4. We'll put the EdgeRouter 6P off to the side for now. Oh, beautiful. All right, so this is a little bit bigger. Now, the EdgeRouter 4 is what I would consider to be kind of the replacement for the EdgeRouter Lite, or this is sort of the next model up from the EdgeRouter Lite. It's basically got the same 3 ports that you get with the EdgeRouter Lite, but it also has the included SFP port as well. So there is the device itself. Let's put that aside. And inside the box as well, we have a quick start guide. We have a power cable. And we have some mounting equipment. That's it. Really simple, actually, inside. No extra marketing fluff or anything. So that is the EdgeRouter 4. Okay, so let's put that one there. I'm not going to go through the same stuff with the EdgeRouter 6P. It's all the same stuff in the box, so we'll just get rid of that. But this router, as you can see, has 5 gigabit Ethernet ports or gigabit RJ45 ports, and then also 1 SFP port. Again, just SFP, not SFP+. Now, the difference is that these are also PoE capable, so you can do 24-volt passive PoE off of any of these 5 ports, from what I understand. So really what that means is that this one is sort of the big brother. The EdgeRouter 4 is the big brother to the EdgeRouter Lite, and the EdgeRouter 6P is the big brother to the EdgeRouter PoE 5. So the 5-port with PoE version of this same router. Okay, so that's about it for the unboxing. Let's go ahead and set these things up. I think I'm going to set up the EdgeRouter 6P. The setup should be very similar on both of these, but again, the 6P has those PoE options, so I wanted to make sure that I show that during the setup of the device. Okay, so I have the camera set up at a little bit of a higher angle so that you guys can see what I'm doing with the EdgeRouter over here. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do with this EdgeRouter is I'm going to take my computer, this is the one labeled a desktop right here, label everything, you guys, and I'm going to plug this into ETH0 on the EdgeRouter. Now, I'm using the EdgeRouter 6P for this example. By default, the EdgeRouter's IP address is 192.168.1.1. Okay, so basically what I need to do is plug my computer into ETH0 and then set my computer manually into that same subnet. Before I do that though, I'm going to power on the EdgeRouter. We're going to plug it in the back here. And now we have a blue light, so that should turn solid white when it's ready to rock and roll. Okay, in the meantime, let's flip over to my desktop. First, I'm going to do a persistent ping over to 192.168.1.1 so that I can see when we are actually able to connect to that device. So now I'm going to right-click on my Ethernet adapter. I'm going to choose Properties, and we're going to change 192.168.200.4, which is my normal IP address, to we'll leave it 1.4. That's fine. As long as it's 1. Anything that's not 1.1, you're fine. And then we'll give ourselves 1.1.1.1 and 8.8.8.8 for DNS. I don't think the DNS matters just yet because we're going to do a couple of other configuration changes before we're done here, but that's okay. So now we're going to say OK. And we should pretty quickly here start seeing replies from 1.1. There we go.
Okay, so now that I can see 192.168.1.1, let's go ahead and bring that up in a browser. So I'm just going to go to Google Chrome. I'm going to say 192.168.1.1. Your connection is not private, advanced, and proceed. And here we have the start of the Edge Max wizard. So username and password by default is UBNT and UBNT. So UBNT for the username, UBNT for the password. Accept the terms of the license agreement and click login. Okay, so the first thing we see here is router is in default config. Do you want to start with the basic setup wizard? And that's a really good idea. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to say yes. However, instead of basic setup, I'm actually going to switch this to the WAN plus 2LAN2 setup wizard. Okay, so here we go. ETH0 is going to be my internet port. Now I'm going to have it set to DHCP because I'm going to have ETH0 plugged into my WAN, which is actually going to be a different subnet in my LAN here. Now, if you have a static IP address from your ISP, this is where you would want to select static IP and then enter the information that your ISP gave you as the static IP information for the WAN port of this device. Notice also that if you want, with this wizard, you can choose ETH0 as the WAN or ETH5/SFP. So for those of you who are lucky enough to be in an area where you have fiber and they can give you a fiber handoff instead of an Ethernet handoff, you can use this device with fiber handoff as your WAN connection. Okay, so for me, I'm just going to say ETH0 and we're going to say DHCP. That is good to go. Now, this next section is talking about how we want to configure our LAN. And in our case, you could say bridge LAN interfaces into a single network. However, notice the note that it says here. It says enabling bridging will have performance impact since it is basically doing the task of a switch in software, and therefore it is better in most cases to use an actual switch instead. Now, this is the same limitation that you have with bridging interfaces in every single edge router with the exception of the EdgeRouter X, which has a dedicated switching chip. Okay, so since this does not have a dedicated switching chip, that means that when you are bonding interfaces together, such as, ETH1 through 4, you are doing layer 3 switching on those ports using the onboard CPU. Okay, there's not a dedicated chip to do that layer 3 switching, meaning that it's taking away from the performance of the device when you do that. So in our case, we're not going to bridge those together, but you can do so if you want. Keep in mind that if you do bridge those together, especially in like a home network or a small office network, you're still going to be hard pressed to max out this device. Okay, so you are taking away the performance of the device, but not really, because you're not really going to be able to max this out unless you're doing some serious routing. If you've got a ton of packets that you're pushing around your network. So I wouldn't be too concerned about it, especially if you want to utilize some of the ports for power over Ethernet. In our case, though, you know what? I take that back. In our case, let's go ahead and bridge the LAN interfaces into a single network, because I'm not going to be maxing it out either, so we might as well do that. Okay, so bridge LAN interfaces into a single network, and then we're going to say LAN ports ETH1 and ETH2. So let's go ahead and pick our subnet. I don't want to use 192.168.1.1 because everyone in the world uses 1.1 or 0.1, so I'm going to make this 192.168.50.1. Class C subnet is fine, and then we're going to check this box to make sure that we enable the DHCP server. Now we're going to be setting up DHCP and changing the settings in just a little bit, but for now this is perfectly fine, just to get us up and running. Okay, so user setup. Set up user and password for the new config. Okay, so you can keep the existing settings. I wouldn't recommend doing that, especially with the default username and password, or we can use the default user and create a new password, which is what I'm going to do in this case. For best practice security, you'd want to create a new user with a very strong password, and don't use the UBNT user like I'm doing here. Okay, so we're going to apply that, and then we're going to apply changes, and then we're going to reboot. And yes, I'm sure. Okay, so now, while we're rebooting, keep in mind that our network is changing. Okay, so ETH0 is now going to be the WAN, so I don't want to use my desktop plugged into the WAN port anymore. I'm going to unplug myself from ETH0, and I'm going to plug myself into ETH1. However, I now need to plug in an internet connection. So I've got this blue cable here. I'm going to plug this into a spare port on my switch, which has its own separate VLAN. I think it's like a 10.154.8 or something funky. And then we are going to plug the WAN, so I'm going to plug my internet into ETH0. Now, I'm going to go back to my computer, and remember, we enabled DHCP. We also changed our subnet, okay? So in my computer, I now need to go back to my network settings, choose properties of my Ethernet adapter. We're going to double-click on Internet IPv4, and then we're going to say obtain IP address automatically, obtain DNS servers automatically. We're going to say OK and OK. We should be able to close this out now. And now, if I bring up my ping, let's do a persistent ping out to the internet to see if we have internet access already. So I'm going to say ping -t 4.2.2.2. So we don't have internet yet, but I did just get connected to the network, and now we have internet. Okay, so I'm already up and running with this device. So let's go ahead and log in with the new IP address. So we're going to say 192.168.50.1. This is unsafe. And UBNT with my new password. And there we go. So now we can see I have a local bridge BR0. That is 192.168.50.1. That is my switching interface. And then I have my internet, which is currently 10.154.8.106. Don't ask about that. That's because I had that network, that weird network set up for a different client. But for all intents and purposes, that is our WAN. Okay, so now what are the first things that you want to do? Keep in mind that the default firewall is already enabled. Okay, so we now have a firewall in our network. Let's go ahead and go over to Services. And then here's our DHCP server, 192.168.50.0 network. And let's go to Actions and View Details. So here's all of our DHCP information. The way that Ubiquiti does DHCP by default is a little weird, so I'm going to change it. So look at the range, for instance. It's ranged from .38 to .243. So again, I don't know where they come up with those numbers, but I'm going to change this from .100 to .254. Again, do whatever is best for your own environment. For the default router or the default gateway, we're going to leave that as 192.168.50.1. If you have a unified controller, either local on your network or hosted elsewhere, you can put the IP address or FQDN in here, and then DHCP will pass out that option to your devices so that when unified devices connect, they'll already know which unified controller they're supposed to go to. Now, for DNS, we've got 192.168.50.1. That is the IP address of the EdgeRouter. I will show you where to add the DNS server to listen on other interfaces as well, but for now, that's fine. I'm also going to put in a backup DNS of 1.1.1.1. Okay, release time, 86,400 seconds. I believe that's 24 hours if I'm not mistaken. That's totally fine for my DHCP needs. So we're going to go ahead and save those settings. And we get the green check mark. That means that our DHCP server is fully configured. Okay, also in this Services tab, we have DNS. So right now, we have one interface that we're listening on, and that's BR0. That's Bridge 0, okay? The switch port of, I believe it's only ETH1 and ETH2 right now. But we're going to say, if we wanted to add, a separate network on ETH4, we could say ETH4 or ETH5, and then add a separate DNS or basically listen for DNS requests on those extra interfaces as well. But by default, you're going to be listening on BR0, or if you didn't go for the switching when you did the wizard, it would listen on whichever Ethernet interface you made your main LAN. If you have dynamic DNS, like a Dyne DNS service, you can also add that information in here. So again, which interface is dynamic DNS and which service are you using? So if you're using Dyne DNS, you can choose Dyne DNS and then enter all of your information, your host name, login and password, etc. And then this will do dynamic DNS right from within the device. I don't have any Dyne DNS, so I'm just going to leave that alone. Okay, so at this point, I'm basically completely set up. I have a working firewall, I have a working DHCP server, I'm answering DNS requests, and now down here at the bottom, we want to click on this little system button here and bring up our system tray. And let's do a couple of additional things. So let's give the system, so the actual EdgeRouter, its own name server, and I'm going to call it, we'll give it 1.1.1.1 as well. And we'll add a second one of 8.8.8.8 just for some redundancy. Here we have NTP is already set up. If we wanted to set up a telnet server or SNMP or a syslog server, we can do that here. We can enable or disable the SSH server for the device, and then we could also add this device to UNMS. So right now I'm not in UNMS. I could add it to UNMS if I want to. Let's also check to see if we're running the latest firmware. So right now we are EdgeRouter 6P firmware version 1.9.8, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, 1.10.3 is out. So let's click on this link to check for updates. This brings us to Ubiquity's download page. And now we're going to click on EdgeMax. Then we're going to find our EdgeRouter 6P over here on the left. And yep, there we go. So EdgeRouter firmware 1.10.3 is the latest. Let's go ahead and download that. Download. While we're downloading, we can see the statistics of us downloading this file. You can see right here, we're downloading at 67 megabits per second. Okay, that file has been downloaded. So now we're going to click open our system tray one more time, scroll to the bottom, and we're going to click on upload a file. And browse to the file that you just downloaded. And now it's going to upload that file to the device, and when it's done uploading, it will prompt you to reboot. Once you reboot, it's going to come back as the latest version of firmware. Okay, there we go. It says in order for changes to take effect, you have to reboot your EdgeRouter, so we're going to say reboot, and yes, we are sure. Okay, so that took about 2 minutes. I'm logging back in, and now we can see that I am on version 1.10.3. Okay, so notice also that now we have this UNMS button. Let's go ahead and connect to my UNMS interface. I'm going to bring up UNMS, and network is in danger in my UNMS because I have devices that are currently not plugged in. One of my ERX test routers, as well as one of my nano stations not plugged in. So let's go ahead and add a new device. So I'm going to click on Devices, and we're going to say Add Device, and then I want to just copy to clipboard. See, it says down here, copy UNMS key and paste into device configuration. So I'm going to copy to clipboard. I'm going to go back to my EdgeRouter. I'm going to click on System, and then right here for UNMS, I'm going to say Enable, and I'm going to paste what is in the clipboard. And then we're going to go ahead and save that. And let's flip back to UNMS, close this down, and very shortly, there we go, we see unknown device popping in here, and it just says UBNT unauthorized. Let's go ahead and click authorize, and we will give it to my main site and authorize. And there we go. So EdgeRouter 6P, we can see the firmware version. We're going to click on that. Okay, so if we click on interfaces, we can see all of my various interfaces, internet, as well as my bridge 0, and we can see that ETH1 is currently plugged in. We can see that PoE is off on a lot of these. Let's see if, I've never actually seen if we can turn PoE on from here. Let's see if we can do that. If I click this, PoE, yeah, there we go. So for instance, ETH2, I'm going to say PoE set to 24 volt. Confirm. Now I don't have anything plugged in there. You don't want to turn 24 volt passive PoE on to a port where you're not sure if there's a compatible device plugged into that port. We're just going to say apply. There we go. And now we can see that we've got 24 volt passive PoE on ETH2. Also over here, I don't know if you can see that or not, but there is a light that came on. So we can see that there is PoE enabled on ETH2. Now, the light is over here on the side. I really wish they would have put the light on the actual Ethernet interfaces like it is on the rest of these switches, because it makes it real easy to see when something is PoE enabled and then you don't accidentally fry a device or something. In my case, though, I'm going to turn the PoE back off and we're going to hit apply. So scrolling through here, speed test. I don't think speed test is available yet. Oh yeah, it is available. So this is where you could do a speed test to a different device. Routes. So here's your routing, the OSPF, services. So here's all your various services on or off. And then for DHCP server, we can even edit our DHCP server settings. So here we have all the same settings that I already input. If we click on leases, we can see our actual DHCP leases, which I'm surprised it's not showing mine, considering my computer is actually on here. Here's a terminal if we want to log into the device in the back end. And then we have logs and statistics and everything else. Okay. Let's go back to the actual device itself. We can see now that UNMS is lit up green, meaning that we are successfully connected to UNMS. And then that setting that I did for power over Ethernet, let's show you how to do that in this interface as well, in case you don't actually have UNMS. So here we have my ETH2 interface. All you have to do is say Actions, click on PoE, and then set this to 24 volt, or you can say 24 volt with 4 pair. Okay, so there's two options here. 24 volt, the one that doesn't say 4 pair is just 24 volt on 2 pair of wire, and then you've got 24 volt on 4 pair of wire. That's going to be device to device, which one of those settings that you need. In most cases, and for most ubiquity devices, like the nano stations and cameras and stuff like that, you just want to set it to regular 24 volt on 2 pair of wire. And save that. And now we can see here under PoE that 24 volt is enabled. All right, let me turn it back off before, again, I don't want to fry any of my devices. Okay, so there you have it. There is a very basic setup of one of the new generations of EdgeRouters. Again, the EdgeRouter 4 is going to be a very, very similar setup to this one. The only difference is that it does not have the same PoE capability that this one does. Other than that, everything else is exactly the same. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. What else do you want to see about these EdgeRouters? Is there anything that you want to specifically have me set up or do a video about? Put that in the comments below, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy the video, please give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please click subscribe. My name's Chris with Crosstalk Solutions, and thank you so much for watching.